Hey, all right. Good morning, Mr. Robinson here for some more American History 2. Today we're going to be looking at a particular individual, one of the progressive presidents of the United States, Teddy Roosevelt. Now, look, you're not going to get this anywhere else, all right, as I tell you all the time, because uh, how many other teachers, virtual teachers, you have that are wearing a three-piece suit? All right, I doubt you have any. I doubt there are any, but there's me. Okay, so I'm here, well dressed, well prepared. Let's go ahead and get this started. All right, I'm gonna take my coat off because when the coat comes off, all right, it's a work day. Time to work. All right, let's get after it. Teddy Roosevelt. That's a picture of him right there. Uh, you're 26th president of the United States. So if we go back, he had what's called a square deal. Now there were three C's with a square deal, but basically the idea behind a square deal is he said, I want to square up, meaning be truthful with the American people, with the American public. So the three C's I want you to remember that square deal by were control corporations, so kind of bust up these monopolies, all right, corporations. So doesn't want the big business to expand that much because big business can at times be unfair to people. All right, so controlling corporations, protecting the consumer goes hand in hand with the first one. In other words, a monopoly is bad for the consumer because if someone has a monopoly, then they can set their own price. In other words, if there is one hamburger place in Moore County, just one place where you can buy a hamburger to eat, they can set their own price. All right, well, no one else can challenge them. Competition tends to drive down prices. Um, so now you open up two hamburger places. All right, that competition is going to drive the prices down. You should know that from civics and economics, which I also teach very well. And then the third one is conserving the environment. All right, he was an environmentalist. Now there are some there are some. I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for. The what now? There are some ironies to Teddy Roosevelt. In other words, he wanted to conserve the environment, protect the environment, but he was a an avid hunter, an avid outdoorsman. All right, conserve natural resources, but he also was an avid hunter. So there's some differences with that. Now he goes on later; he wins a Nobel Peace Prize, but we, you're going to learn he was a war hero. So there's some irony in that as well. So his square deal, his cousin, who we're going to study later, Franklin Roosevelt, had something called a New Deal. All right, I don't know if you know, but your teacher, he's kind of a big deal. So let's just get into it. All right, this is how he became famous. He was a war hero from the Spanish-American War. Don't worry about the Spanish-American War right now, but you're going to learn about it later in the next unit called imperialism. He was a war hero, so that led him to become vice president. Now he became president though when the president William McKinley was shot. So President McKinley got shot and died, assassinated. Teddy Roosevelt becomes president after that. If you don't know about the succession in American politics, it's the president, vice president, and then Speaker of the House. But so he's 42 years old when he became president. He was bold. He used his status as president to what's called the bully pulpit. That's what they called it or known it as. He's trying to help American welfare by bullying these corporations and shutting them down. Federal power. So he was a trust buster. Okay, in other words, these trusts are like monopolies, and he's busting them up. A trust buster is what he's known as. Sought to end monopolies. So his motto here is called "Speak softly and carry a big stick." In other words, he used that big stick to bust the trust up. The Justice Department, he ordered them to sue Northern Securities because they were a trust. There's an example. They had established a monopoly over the railroads. Remember, monopolies are bad for consumers. So he's trying to stop these monopolies, these big corporations, in order to protect the consumer. There's just a little cartoon. This is a trust, all right? The trust of the monopoly there is all fat and happy. He's got all the money. Teddy Roosevelt squeezing it down. It's just a cartoon of it. There's another example. So in 1902, there was a coal strike in Pennsylvania. Well, what's coal used for? Coal is used to supply power to the American public. So the coal miners, they go on strike. They're demanding these things that, if you remember about labor unions, which we studied before, what does typically labor unions want? Well, they want less hours, more pay. This is exactly what these coal miners demanded. So this strike lasts 5 months. It's a long time. 5 months into the strike, the coal reserves are low. Well, it's on the next one. The coal reserves are low, so that's threatening the welfare of the American public. The American public needs coal in order to supply power, get power going. So Roosevelt says, look, because this is threatening the welfare of the American public, remember, we need power to supply energy, then he intervenes. A compromise came upon, and basically it sets a precedent that if a private strike by employees, threatened the welfare, the federal government would then intervene to stop or make a compromise in that strike. All right, so that's an example of him using federal power there. Here's another example. This is important. All right, I see this a lot of times on the final exam, which is still up in the air as to whether there's going to be a state-imposed final exam this year. But there's a book written by a muckraker, which we studied before, Upton Sinclair. The book's called The Jungle. Now, I used to have my students, if you were in class here, I'd have you read an excerpt from it, but probably not going to do that virtually. You can look it up and read some of it on your own if you want. So, anyways, this book is exposed all the unsafeness, the how dirty the meatpacking industry was, is basically what it did. So when the public read that, they were kind of outraged. All right, the book, it talks about mice going into the grinder and being grinded up in the meatpacking industry, as well as animal byproducts that people would not want to eat. All right, I won't get into the specifics of it, but Roosevelt, he read it too, so he appointed a commission to look into the meatpacking industry. So what happens is they come up with something called the Meat Inspection Act. This is important. So this is an example of him looking at this and saying this meatpacking industry is bad for the consumer. It's bad for business because people aren't going to be buying the meat products. So he comes up with the Meat Inspection Act to protect the consumer and make sure the consumer won't get sick off the meat. Another thing, comes up with there's a Pure Food and Drug Act that happens under his watch. Now, it used to be when people sold products, they didn't have to back up in it what was in it. In other words, I could sell you a bottle of water, and nothing more. A bottle of water with salt in it, and tell you it cures any type of illness you have. Okay, well, we know that's not true. I can sell you a bottle of water with salt in it and tells you it cures, I don't know, cancer or anything. We know that that's not true. But that's what they used to could do here before this Pure Food and Drug Act. So it halted the sale of contaminated foods. It made people, when they sold these products, they have to disclose what is in the products. All right. So trying to, again, protect the consumer. So that's the health industry he's working on. This is an example kind of the meatpacking industry. Okay, that's like an actual whole pig or cow right there that's used. This isn't how it's done, okay, properly. This is how it was done then, though. It's not how it's done today. So another thing he did with the conservation of natural resources, coal and lumber. All right, they had been exploiting the environment, sewage. There had been a lot of waste was going on. So what he did was he came up with there were certain acts to limit this, but then he also, this is important, he set aside 148 million acres of forest reserves to protect the natural environment, conserve the natural resources of the environment. All right, so that's what something Roosevelt did. There's a picture of him out on a hunting expedition, because remember, he was a hunter. This is him in civil rights. All right, this is the last thing I'm going to go over. So with civil rights, if you remember when we talked about Booker T. Washington at the time, just remember this is around the beginning of the 20th century. He invited Booker T. Washington to the White House. The NAACP was formed under Roosevelt's watch, but there really wasn't a whole lot that he did to engage in the process for more civil rights for African Americans at the time. But maybe for the assignment, if you want to put something on there, something he did was he invited Booker T to the White House. Okay, maybe some type of legislation or groups that were formed. The NAACP was formed while he was in office. But it's not going to be until the 1960s. We're going to get into that later in the semester, where civil rights really kind of takes off and you start to see real changes made for African Americans. All right, this is just the chart. Now this is the assignment. Okay, I put this in a Google Doc and then uploaded it into assignments on Canvas. All right, so that's just a look at it. Now listen, when you think of Teddy Roosevelt, think of the square deal. All right, think of all these things. All right, but here's something else that I was trying to tell students. He was kind of an alpha male type of person. All right, for instance, I'll tell you a story. He got shot one time. He was giving a speech, got shot, finished, continued speaking for 30 more minutes, and then went to the hospital to have the bullet taken out that had punctured his lung. So he's a pretty tough guy, an alpha male. All right, not unlike your teacher. I'd say he's an alpha male too. But I'm gonna put this PowerPoint, this video on Canvas. I'm also putting the assignments on Canvas as well. So I'm gonna try to get through and grade all the assignments that you guys. I know a lot of y'all made assignments up yesterday, so I'm gonna try to get through and grade all those later today. But please email me if you have any questions about anything.